Before the family upstairs opened their eyes, she had already been working for 2 hours. Fires lit, chamber pots emptied, floors scrubbed, hands split open from lye, soap, and cold water. And the day hadn't even started yet. She was 20 years old. She earned 17 pounds a year. She slept in a room with no window, no heat, and a mattress stuffed with horsehair. She would do this every single day for the rest of her working life, and she was considered one of the lucky ones. It's 1888. London is the wealthiest city on earth. Behind every gleaming facade, every seven-course dinner, every perfectly pressed dress, there is an invisible army keeping it all running. Over 1.5 million servants across Britain, most of them women, most of them invisible by design. Tonight, we go below stairs, also into the coal dust and the cold water and the silence that the family upstairs never had to hear. This is where the real story begins. London, 1888. Population, 5,400,000 people crammed into every available inch of the largest city on earth. The capital of an empire that spans a quarter of the globe. The center of world finance, world trade, world power. If you stood on London Bridge and looked out at the Thames, you would see ships from every continent, goods from every corner of the world flowing in and out of the busiest port in human history. From the outside, Victorian London is magnificent. The grand boulevards of the West End, the gleaming white terraces of Belgravia and Mayfair, the palatial clubs of Pall Mall, where men of consequence make decisions that shape nations. The shops of Oxford Street stocked with goods that would have seemed like pure fantasy to any previous generation. Gas lighting on every major street, railways connecting the city to the entire country, the telegraph connecting it to the entire world. This is the richest city that has ever existed, and it runs on invisible labor. In 1888, domestic service is the single largest employer of women in Britain. Over 1.5 million people work as servants. Not because they chose it the way you might choose a profession today, because the alternatives were worse. The mill, if there was a mill. The workhouse, if there wasn't. The street, if everything else failed. Service is the respectable option, the safe option. The option that keeps you fed and sheltered and on the right side of the line that separates survival from destitution. Yeah, for a working-class girl in 1888, the path is almost predetermined. You finish whatever schooling your family can afford, 2 years, 3 if you're lucky. You learn your letters and your numbers and not much else. And then somewhere between 12 and 16, you go into service. You take a position in someone's house. You learn your duties, you keep your head down, you survive. The house we're entering tonight sits on a quiet street in Belgravia, one of London's most exclusive districts, developed just decades earlier on land that was marshland within living memory. Now it is a grid of identical white stucco terraces, each one fronted with black iron railings and tall sash windows, and an air of absolute permanent prosperity. The Ashworth household, a merchant banker and his family, 12 servants to maintain a house of this size, which is considered efficient by the standards of the day. Grander households run to 20, 30, even more. 12 is modern, 12 is lean. But here is what those 12 people actually are. They are two separate worlds sharing one building. Upstairs, thick carpets that swallow sound, oil paintings on papered walls, rooms kept warm by fires that appear to light themselves, a dining table that seats 12, laid with crystal and sterling silver and hand-painted china. A household that operates with the appearance of effortless grace. Downstairs, stone floors, narrow passages, ceilings low enough to make you feel the weight of the house pressing down on you. Rooms with no natural light, beds with no pillows, a hierarchy so rigid that speaking to the wrong person in the wrong tone could end your employment without a reference, which in 1888 is not just inconvenient, it is catastrophic. A servant without a reference cannot find another position. A servant without a position has nowhere to go but down. The smells tell you which world you're in. Upstairs, it's beeswax and fresh flowers and the faint tobacco of the study, the warm, heavy scent of prosperity. Downstairs, it's coal dust and damp wool and lye soap, the smell of water that's never quite hot enough and work that's never quite finished. These two worlds occupy the same address. They share the same walls. They never actually touch. And the people who inhabit the downstairs world, the ones who light the fires and polish the silver and empty the chamber pots and wash the dishes and scrub the floors and haul the coal and keep the whole magnificent illusion running, they are, by design, invisible. Not metaphorically invisible, functionally invisible. Trained to move through rooms without being noticed. Trained to be present without being seen. Trained to disappear when the family appears and reappear when the family retreats. This is the world we're entering tonight. This is what it actually costs to keep a Victorian household alive. 4:20 in the morning. The bell hasn't rung yet. That's the only reason she's still in bed. Not because she's rested, not because the night was kind, but because the bell rings at 4:30 and she has learned through months of practice to wake 10 minutes before it does. 10 minutes to splash water on her face, 10 minutes to dress in the dark, 10 minutes to be ready before Mrs. Pembroke appears in the corridor with her candle and her expectations. The room is 8 feet by 6 feet, no window. The basement level of the house sits partially underground, which means no natural light reaches this space at any hour. Morning and midnight look identical in here. The only way to know the difference is the clock she cannot see, the bell she is waiting for, and the particular quality of cold that belongs to early November, a cold that has settled into the stone walls overnight and radiates back out like the room itself is trying to warn you about the day ahead. The bed is narrow iron. The mattress is horsehair, thin and lumpy. There is no pillow. Pillows are not provided for servants at this level of the household. She uses a rolled petticoat. The blanket is wool, scratchy, not quite sufficient. She has been cold every night since October and will be cold every night until April, and this is simply a fact of the life, not a complaint, because complaints serve no purpose down here. She swings her legs out of bed. The floor hits her feet like a punishment. Her stockings are draped over the iron bed frame where she left them, still damp from yesterday. She pulls them on anyway because damp stockings are better than bare feet on stone, and there is no time and no heat to dry them properly. Her uniform hangs on the hook by the door. Black dress, rough cotton, designed entirely for durability. White apron, stained despite constant effort. White cap to cover hair that hasn't been properly washed in 2 weeks because heating water costs coal, and coal belongs to the household, not to her. She dresses in the dark, fingers clumsy with buttons she has buttoned 1,000 times. Lights the candle stub with matches kept in a tin on the shelf. 1 candle per week is the allowance. She's 4 days in and already halfway through this one. She's always calculating. Coal, candles, soap, the 10 shillings sent home to Yorkshire each month. The arithmetic of almost not enough. The bell rings. 4:30 exactly. She's already moving. Mrs. Pembroke is in the servants' hall when she passes, fully dressed, not a wrinkle visible, hair in a perfect bun. This woman has been in service since she was 12 years old, and she carries that history in her posture. The drawing room fire first, then the morning room, the dining room, the study warm by 6. Don't forget the library today. Yes, Mrs. Pembroke. She takes the back stairs. Always the back stairs. The servant staircase is narrow, steep, unlit. She navigates it entirely by feel. Coal scuttle in one hand, kindling box in the other, a feet finding each step through muscle memory alone. At the top, she emerges into the back corridor of the ground floor and enters a different world. Thick carpet underfoot, the smell of beeswax and yesterday's fires. Silence of a completely different quality to the silence below. The silence of rooms waiting to be used rather than rooms that don't matter. The drawing room. 30 feet long, furniture sheeted for the night, curtains sealed against the dark, the fireplace cold and full of yesterday's ash. She kneels on the hearthrug, Persian, expensive, softer than anything in her own room, and begins. Ash cleared with the small shovel. Kindling laid in the exact configuration she has learned catches fastest, paper twisted beneath, coal added piece by piece, structure built for heat and duration, match struck, flame caught. She watches it, confirming the fire will hold before she moves on, because a fire that dies means starting over, and starting over means falling behind. And falling behind means a conversation with Mrs. Pembroke that nobody wants. Fire confirmed. She's already moving. 10 fireplaces in this house, each one requiring the same sequence. Clear, lay, light, confirm, move. Her knees are aching by the 3rd fireplace. Her hands are black with coal dust by the 5th. By the time she finishes the last one, it is nearly 6 o'clock and she has been working for over an hour without pause, and the family upstairs is still asleep in their warm rooms and will wake to fires that simply exist in the same way that breakfast simply appears. And clean floors simply are, and the whole household simply functions. As though none of it requires a human being on her knees in the dark at 4:30 in the morning to make it happen. By the time she reaches the scullery, cook has been awake since 4. The range is going full blast, filling the kitchen with heat and the smell of baking bread. The scullery next door is a different matter. Stone sink, cold water from the pump, wooden draining board stacked with the previous night's dinner dishes. A dinner party for 8 people means soup tureens and crystal glasses, and sterling silver serving pieces and roasting pans crusted with burnt fat that has been sitting and hardening since 10 o'clock the previous night. She fills the sink. The water is cold enough to ache. She picks up the brush and starts. There is a hierarchy in this house so precise, so rigid, so completely understood by everyone within it, that it operates without ever needing to be written down or explained. You absorb it through observation, through correction, through the particular silence that falls when someone steps outside their designated place. 12 servants, 12 people living and working in the same building, and yet the distance between the top of that structure and the bottom is as vast as the distance between the family and the servants themselves. At the top, Mrs. Pembroke, the housekeeper. 50 years old, in service since she was 12. She has spent nearly 4 decades working her way from the very bottom of this world to its summit, and she carries every one of those years in the way she holds herself. Straight-backed, precise, always dressed before anyone else is awake. She controls the household budget, manages the female staff, holds the keys to every locked room in the house. And there are many locked rooms. Her word below stairs is not a suggestion, it is the conclusion of the matter. Beside her in authority, Mr. Davies, the butler, 20 years with the Ashworth family. He knows which wine goes with which course, which chair the master prefers, which topics make Mrs. Ashworth uncomfortable at dinner. He moves through the house in near silence, observing everything, commenting on almost nothing. His function is to make the family's life seamless. His art is ensuring that the seams are never visible. Below them, the upper servants. Rose, the lady's maid, is 22 years old and occupies a position that sets her apart from almost everyone else below stairs. She serves Mrs. Ashworth directly. She dresses her, arranges her hair, maintains her wardrobe, accompanies her on calls. She knows which of Mrs. Ashworth's friends she actually likes and which ones she simply tolerates. She knows the society gossip before it reaches the newspapers. She has a better room than anyone else on the servant floor, better wages. A measure of reflected status borrowed from the woman she serves. Rose is not unaware of any of this. Then James, the footman. 19, tall, handsome in the way that Victorian households considered useful for a footman. Because footmen are visible, they stand in the dining room and open the front door and represent the household to the outside world. An appearance is part of the position. James is also strictly prohibited from any romantic involvement with the female staff. The prohibition is explicit, repeated, and not particularly effective. Further down, the parlor maid, the housemaid, the between maid. Each one with clearly defined duties, clearly defined spaces, clearly defined limits on where they go and when and for what purpose. And at the bottom, the scullery maid, the lowest rank in the entire structure, the person who does the work that everyone else considers beneath them, which is considerable given how much work everyone else is already doing. Sarah is 3 years in now. She has moved through these ranks with her head down and her hands working. Scullery maid first, then between maid, now housemaid at 17 pounds a year with her own room and a candle allowance that reflects her new position. She understands the hierarchy not as an abstract structure, but as the lived texture of every single day. She understands, for example, that she does not speak to Mr. Davies unless he speaks to her first, that she clears from the room when Mrs. Pembroke needs to address the upper staff privately, that when Rose walks through a corridor, there is a particular adjustment required, not quite deference, but an awareness of rank that communicates itself through posture and eye contact, and the slight pause that says, "I know where I am in this, and so do you." She learned the hardest version of this lesson in her first months. Standing at Miss Catherine's bedroom window, looking out at the Thames and the rising towers of the bridge under construction, just 30 seconds of stillness, just a narrow slice of London visible between curtains. Rose appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, expression requiring no interpretation whatsoever. While the chamber pot does not require you to stand at the window staring out like you own the place. No, Miss Rose. I'm sorry, Miss Rose. It stays with you, that kind of correction. Not because it is cruel, it isn't particularly, but because it locates you so precisely. It draws the boundary in ink. You are here. The window is there. The view belongs to someone else. This is what the hierarchy actually is beneath the titles and the wages and the careful architecture of the servant structure. It is a daily, hourly renegotiation of who is permitted to want what, who is permitted to look, who is permitted to rest, who is permitted to simply stand still for 30 seconds and watch the city through glass without it meaning something it shouldn't. The answer at the bottom of the structure is almost no one, and everyone below stairs knows it. And most of them, after enough time, stop asking the question entirely. The work does not stop. That is the thing people do not understand until they are inside it. There is no moment in the servant's day when the list of tasks reaches its end. You finish one thing and the next thing is already waiting. You finish that and there are 3 more behind it. The house is a machine that consumes labor the way the range consumes coal. Constantly, completely, without acknowledgement. Tuesday morning, the breakfast dishes are done, the fires are holding, and Mrs. Pembroke has a new instruction waiting before Sarah has fully dried her hands. The carpets need beating. In a house of this size, the carpets are everywhere. Heavy wool runners in every upstairs corridor, thick Persian rugs in the drawing room and the study, and on smaller pieces in the bedrooms and the morning room. They trap everything. Coal dust drifting up from the basement, mud carried in on boots from the street, the general accumulation of London air, which in 1888 is not air so much as a suspension of coal smoke and fog, and the particular grime of 5 million people living in close proximity. The carpets must be removed, carried outside, beaten until the dust stops rising, and returned to their exact positions before the family notices they were ever gone. Agnes is already waiting at the top of the servant stairs with the first runner rolled and ready. They carry it between them, 12 feet of dense wool, heavier than it looks. Down the narrow staircase and through the basement passage and out into the back courtyard. The courtyard is small. We are surrounded by high brick walls that belong entirely to the servant world. The family never comes here. This is where the washing hangs and the coal is delivered, and the work gets done that cannot be done inside. November in London. The fog is thick enough to taste. Coal smoke from 10,000 chimneys sits over the city like a ceiling. The cold bites through her uniform the moment she steps outside. She raises the carpet beater and brings it down. The dust erupts in a gray cloud. She hits it again. And again. The dust keeps coming. Months of accumulated grime releasing itself into the cold air. Her arms start burning after 5 minutes. After 10, they are genuinely aching. She does not stop because there is no stopping. There are 3 carpets, and they will all be beaten before she goes back inside, and then the courtyard will smell of dust and cold, and her shoulders will carry the work for the rest of the day. 3 carpets, hauled out, beaten, hauled back, relayed. By the time it is finished, it is nearly 10 o'clock. She has been awake for over 5 hours. The silver comes next. The Ashworths are entertaining tomorrow. 12 for dinner, which means every piece of sterling silverware the household owns must be polished to a standard that reflects the family's position in the world. Not clean. Gleaming. The kind of gleam that tells a dinner guest, without words, that this is a household of consequence. She collects the wooden box from the butler's pantry, the pink chemical paste that smells sharp and medicinal, the cloths worn soft from use. She carries everything to the scullery and begins. Apply the paste. Let it dry to a haze. Buff with the cloth until the tarnish lifts, and the surface underneath shows itself. Bright, cold, mirror flat. Move to the next piece. 88 pieces in total. Forks, knives, spoons in 3 sizes. Serving spoons, ladles, fish servers, butter knives, sugar tongs, each one requiring the same sequence. Apply, dry, buff, set aside. Apply, dry, buff, set aside. It is mindless work. Her hands move without requiring her attention, and so her mind goes where it goes, which is usually home. Yorkshire is 3 years behind her now, and already beginning to soften at the edges, the way memories do when they stop being refreshed by the actual place. Her mother's face she can still see clearly. Her father's handwriting in the occasional letter. Brief, muy careful, a man unused to words. Her younger siblings, strangers now, growing in directions she cannot track. She earns £17 a year. She sends 10 shillings home each month. That leaves her 2 shillings for soap, for replacing stockings worn through at the heel, for the paper and ink of a letter home. The arithmetic leaves no room for error and no room for want, and she has stopped wanting things that don't fit inside it. 43rd piece, 44th. Then Martha appears in the scullery doorway. Mrs. Pembroke needs her upstairs. The parlor maid is ill. Sarah is to wash, change her apron, and be ready in 20 minutes to serve the family's luncheon. Her hands go still on the silver. Above stairs, while the family is present. 20 minutes. She looks down at herself, coal-stained, polish smeared, and a hair escaping its cap in 3 directions. And she moves. There is a London that the Ashworth family knows, the wide, swept streets of Belgravia and Mayfair, the exclusive shops of Bond Street, the private clubs and the afternoon calls, and the carefully managed social geography of respectable Victorian life. It is a London of carriages and calling cards and rooms kept warm by fires that light themselves. And then there is the London that Sarah knows. The crossing sweeper boy at the corner, working since before dawn, clearing horse manure from the path so that people with clean boots can keep them that way. The grocer's shop on Elizabeth Street, warm and fragrant with coffee and spice, where Mr. Travers wraps sugar and flour in brown paper and ties the parcels with string and adds up the total in his head without hesitation. Or the servant's entrance at the back of every grand house on every grand street, the door that exists so that the machinery of the household never has to be seen arriving. The fog that sits over everything, yellow-gray, coal-thick, the permanent weather of a city burning itself warm. This is working London, service London, the city that makes the other city possible. She's out on an errand this afternoon. Cook needs supplies from the grocer. Mrs. Pembroke has handed her a list, a basket, and coins wrapped in paper with instructions to go directly there and directly back and not to dawdle and not to lose the change. She has done this errand a dozen times. She knows the route, knows the shop, knows exactly how long it should take. She also knows that she has 20 minutes of margin if she moves quickly. She turns south toward the Thames. You can see it before you reach it. Even in the fog, the towers rise above everything else in this part of London. 2 Gothic structures climbing out of the river, all pointed arches and decorative stonework, completely impractical in their ornamentation and absolutely extraordinary in their scale. She has been watching them grow for 3 years now, from her occasional stolen glimpses out of upstairs windows and her rare afternoons near the river. She has watched the towers go from foundations to their current height of over 200 feet. She has watched the high-level walkways take shape between them. She has watched the cranes and the scaffolding and the barges delivering stone and the hundreds of workers swarming over the structure like the building itself is alive. Tower Bridge. Not finished yet. They say 1894, 6 more years, but already transforming the skyline in a way that makes it impossible to imagine the river without it. The construction site is controlled chaos. Riveters, stonemasons, ironworkers, engineers. The sound carries across the water even through the fog. Hammering, the clang of metal on metal, the creak of cranes lifting blocks of Cornish granite. The two towers are built on foundations sunk deep into the riverbed. Over 70,000 tons of material in total, raised piece by piece from barges floating on the Thames below, assembled into something that will outlast everyone currently alive to watch it rise. A clerk stands near her on the embankment, watching the bridge with open admiration, ink-stained fingers, a suit that has seen better years. He tells her that the bascule mechanism, the part that will lift the roadway sections to allow tall ships to pass upriver, will be powered by hydraulic accumulators. Water pressure in massive underground cylinders, generating enough force to raise a 1,000-ton roadway as smoothly as lifting a hand. Science and industry, he says. The modern age made visible. She doesn't fully understand hydraulic accumulators. Her schooling ended at 13. But she understands the awe of it. The fact that human beings looked at this river and decided to span it with something that could also open, that could serve both the road traffic above and the ship traffic below simultaneously. That kind of thinking is beyond her experience, but not beyond her appreciation. She is gone longer than she planned. She always is when the bridge is involved. It is on the way back, moving quickly through the streets toward Eccleston, that she sees the woman at the corner, standing against the wall of a building, swaying slightly, dress torn at the shoulder, muddy, a bruise forming along her jaw, eyes that are present but barely. She is young, younger than she looks in that moment, and she is hurt, and she is alone, and she is trying to hold herself upright through what appears to be pure stubbornness. Agnes, walking beside her, says quietly, "Leave her. It is not our business. We are already late." She crosses the street anyway. Up close, the woman's name is Ellen. There was a man. She fought. She ran. Her landlady will think the worst if she comes home like this. Her sister works nearby, a cook in a house on Belgrave Square. If someone could just fetch her, just tell her. It takes 15 minutes. They find the sister. The sister comes. Ellen is taken care of. She arrives back at the house late. Mrs. Pembroke is waiting. The grocer was busy, she says. Mrs. Pembroke counts the change, nods, and sends her back to the scullery. The incident is over, except that it is not, and it never quite will be. Because Ellen is what the city produces when women run out of options, and the distance between a housemaid with a position and a woman swaying at a street corner is not as wide as anyone would like to believe. It is the width of one lost reference, one illness at the wrong moment, one piece of bad luck in a life that has no margin for it. She knows this. Every woman below stairs knows this. It is the knowledge that lives underneath everything else, quiet and permanent, like the cold in the basement walls. In the autumn of 1888, London became afraid. Not the abstract managed fear of people who read about terrible things in newspapers and then set the newspaper down and go about their day. Something deeper than that. Something that got into the city's bones and stayed there. A fear that walked the streets after dark and sat at dinner tables and filtered down through the floors of every house in London until it reached the basement level, where it found the servants already awake and already working and already knowing, in the way that women without protection have always known, that the world is more dangerous for some people than for others. 5 women murdered in Whitechapel between August and November. The details reported in fragments by newspapers that struggled to describe what had happened without fully describing it. What the press could say was this: the killings were savage. They appeared to be the work of one person. That person had not been caught, and the police, despite enormous public pressure and a level of scrutiny that made the Metropolitan Force deeply uncomfortable, had no suspect in custody and no credible prospect of one. The name the press gave him spread across the city within days. It reached Belgravia through the usual channels. The butcher's boy mentioned it to the kitchen maid. Martha heard Mrs. Ashworth discussing it with her friends in the drawing room. Agnes heard it from her fiancé, who heard it from someone at the shipping office. By November, it is not news anymore. It is weather. It is simply the condition of the city, this presence moving through the East End, this thing that cannot be caught or explained or reasoned with. Whitechapel is miles from Belgravia, The women who died there lived lives so distant from the Ashworth household that they might have inhabited a different country. They were poor in a way that makes the poverty of service look comfortable by comparison. They worked the streets because every other option had already been exhausted. They were, in the language of the newspapers and the police reports, unfortunate women, a phrase that managed to simultaneously acknowledge their suffering and suggest that it was, in some way, their own fault. And yet the fear does not stay in Whitechapel. It travels. It crosses the invisible boundary between the East End and the West, between the dangerous streets and the fashionable ones, because fear does not respect the geography of class. Mrs. Ashworth will not allow her daughter out unaccompanied. The ladies of the household discuss the murders over luncheon with a horror that is genuine, but also, from below stairs, audible as something different to the fear the servants carry. It is the fear of proximity, the fear that something from that other London might find its way into this one. The servants' fear is not about proximity. It is about category. Agnes says it plainly over a carpet beater in the back courtyard, in a voice kept low enough that only Sarah can hear. If something happened to one of us, who'd notice? Who'd care? Then the night it comes close. A scream on Chester Square, 1 street away. The whole house waking at midnight, Thomas wanting to go out, Mrs. Pembroke ordering everyone inside in the voice she uses when she will not be argued with, and also, underneath that, something that no one has ever heard from her before. Fear, raw, undisguised, just for a moment before she locks it back behind her authority. It is not him, a domestic incident, a drunk husband. The woman survives. The relief is real, and it is also insufficient because it could have been him, and next time it might be, and that possibility does not leave with the police when they finish their questions and walk back out into the fog. It simply becomes part of the walls, part of the cold, part of the permanent unspoken knowledge of what it costs to be a woman in 1888 with nowhere particular to hide. Most people who enter domestic service do not last a year. They quit, or they're dismissed, or they fall into some difficulty that removes them from the household before the 12 months are out. The work defeats them, or the loneliness does, or the cold, or the hierarchy, or the simple arithmetic of a life that asks everything and returns very little. Mrs. Pembroke has seen it happen more times than she can count. Girls arriving from the country with their 2 dresses and their letters of introduction lasting 3 months, 4, 6, and then gone. Back to wherever they came from, or somewhere worse. Sarah's first year ends on a Thursday in April. Mrs. Pembroke calls her into the small office off the servants' hall where the household accounts are kept. Sit down. The words that follow are not effusive. Mrs. Pembroke does not do effusive, but they are real, and in this world real is worth more than warm. You were so small when you arrived, so frightened. I thought you'd last a month, maybe 2. You have worked hard. You have not complained. You have not caused trouble. That is rarer than you might think. A new contract, £15 a year. The possibility of being made by October. She says yes before the offer is fully finished. October comes. The promotion holds. £17 a year and duties that no longer begin and end in the scullery. She serves at table regularly now. She manages tasks rather than only performing them. The physical work is still constant, still demanding, but there is a difference between exhaustion that leads nowhere and exhaustion that is building toward something. She is building toward something. She can feel it in the way Mrs. Pembroke speaks to her, in the small adjustments of tone and expectation that communicate, without being stated, that she has moved from provisional to permanent. Agnes marries in August. The ceremony is small. The tea in the servants' hall afterward is not, and Mrs. Pembroke opens a bottle from the cellar that nobody asks about and everyone appreciates. Agnes is radiant. Her Jack is nervous. You'll find someone too, Agnes tells her. She smiles and says nothing because she is not thinking about marriage. She is thinking about October. Then marry. The cough begins in autumn, the kind that arrives with the cold, and is supposed to leave with it, but doesn't. By December, it is rattling her chest in the night. The doctor comes, examines her, looks at Mrs. Pembroke with an expression that says everything before his words do. Consumption, early stages, she needs rest, good food, country air. London fog is the worst possible environment for lungs in this condition. She leaves 3 days later. Sarah helps her pack. They do not say what they both know, which is that a girl of Mary's age, from a family of Mary's means, with consumption at any stage, is not likely to recover fully enough to return to service. They say instead that she will get better and come back, and they will share a room again. The cab pulls away. Sarah watches from the basement window. The news comes in February, passed along through the usual channels. Mary died peacefully. She was at home. Her family was with her. The grief is harder than expected. They were not close friends in the way people outside service might understand friendship. They were two girls surviving in the same dark room, and that is its own kind of bond, quiet and unspoken and real. Sarah gets a new roommate, 12 years old, from Sussex, terrified of everything. She tries to be kind to her the way Mary was kind to her. It is all she knows to do. By September, she is a housemaid, £18 a year, her own room, a window. She stands at that window the first night looking out at the narrow rectangle of London sky above the courtyard wall. She can see stars, faintly, through the coal smoke. She stands there for a long time, not thinking about anything in particular, just standing at a window in a room that belongs to her, looking at a sky she has earned the right to see. It is not much. It is everything. Before the family upstairs opened their eyes, she had already been working for 2 hours. Fires lit, chamber pots emptied, floors scrubbed, hands split open from lye soap and cold water. And the day hadn't even started yet. She was 20 years old. She earned £17 a year. She slept in a room with no window, no heat, and a mattress stuffed with horsehair. And she would do this every single day for the rest of her working life. And she was considered one of the lucky ones. It's 1888. London is the wealthiest city on earth. Behind every gleaming facade, every 7-course dinner, every perfectly pressed dress, there is an invisible army keeping it all running. Over 1.5 million servants across Britain, most of them women, most of them invisible by design. Tonight we go below stairs. If this is the kind of history that actually matters to you, the history of ordinary people, not kings and generals, subscribe. It costs nothing, and it keeps this work alive. And when this one ends, don't stop. The next story is just as dark, just as real, and just as forgotten.